When the question was posed about who might be controlling the highest office in the land, it struck a nerve. The implication behind such a question wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. It wasn't just an inquiry. It was an insinuation, wrapped in political theater designed to stir doubt and controversy. Jasmine Crockett, known for her directness and unapologetic defense of democratic institutions, didn't hesitate to respond with the clarity and conviction that's come to define her public presence. Her reaction wasn't about defending one individual, but about standing up against a trend that's become all too common in today's political discourse: the casual undermining of authority through baseless questioning. When someone suggests that the person elected by millions of Americans isn't actually the one making decisions, it's more than political banter. It's an attempt to erode trust in the very fabric of governance. Crockett understood this. Her response was rooted in a deep concern for the implications of letting such rhetoric go unchallenged. She called out the tactic for what it was: a distraction, a deflection, and ultimately a disservice to the people who rely on their leaders to address real issues. Her voice carried the frustration of many who are tired of watching important national conversations derailed by inflammatory sound bites designed for headlines rather than progress. In challenging the premise of the question, Crockett didn't just defend the office. She defended the intelligence of the American people, who deserve better than conspiratorial innuendos masquerading as serious inquiries. Her tone made it clear: leadership should be judged on actions, policies, and results, not on whisper campaigns or speculative accusations. She reminded everyone that questioning legitimacy without evidence doesn't just hurt individuals, it hurts democracy. In a moment that could have easily devolved into personal attacks or partisan shouting, Crockett instead turned the lens back onto the broader issue: the need for responsibility and political dialogue. The exchange also highlighted her ability to navigate complex emotions, righteous anger, disappointment, and determination, all while maintaining control of the message. That's not easy in today's climate, where televised debates often reward volume over substance. But Crockett's approach was different. Her indignation was focused, not flailing. Her message was deliberate, not improvised. It was the kind of response that resonated because it didn't feel rehearsed. It felt real. What made her reaction even more significant was the context in which it occurred. It came at a time when public confidence in institutions is fragile, when misinformation spreads faster than facts, and when too many leaders are content to score political points rather than protect democratic norms. Her decision to push back so forcefully was about more than defending against a single question. It was about drawing a line between legitimate scrutiny and cynical sabotage. Between healthy debate and reckless speculation, her words carried weight because they echoed a growing sentiment among Americans who are weary of political gamesmanship. They want truth, they want leadership, and they want representatives who aren't afraid to confront nonsense when they see it. Crockett's response wasn't just a soundbite, it was a signal that some are still willing to say enough is enough when discourse turns destructive. She also implicitly challenged others in leadership to step up. If one voice can call out disinformation in real time, then others can and should do the same. Political courage, she showed, isn't just about casting votes or proposing bills. Sometimes it's about standing your ground in the moment, refusing to let falsehoods go unchallenged even when it's easier to stay quiet. That moment wasn't about scoring political points. It was about holding the line against a narrative that, left unchecked, undermines the core of democratic engagement. Crockett reminded everyone that leadership isn't just about managing policies, it's about protecting the truth. And sometimes that protection requires fire. Not to destroy, but to illuminate. Her fire lit up a room trying to cloak truth in shadows, and in doing so, she gave others permission to do the same. When Jasmine Crockett took the floor in response to a line of questioning steeped in skepticism and suspicion, she used the opportunity not only to defend the integrity of leadership, but also to draw attention to a deeper issue: the troubling trend of certain political factions perpetually chasing conspiracy narratives. Her words were pointed and intentional. They weren't just about the moment, they were about a larger pattern that's been playing out in the political arena for far too long. She made it clear that the obsession with conspiracy theories is not harmless. It has consequences. It shifts focus away from what truly matters: education, healthcare, jobs, climate, infrastructure, and channels national attention towards speculation and sensationalism. Rather than participating in the legislative process with the aim of improving lives, some seem more interested in generating viral clips, throwing around vague accusations, and feeding echo chambers with content designed to inflame rather than inform. Crockett called it out boldly. When a party or group allows conspiracy to become its fuel, it ceases to be a constructive force. Democracy thrives on debate and disagreement, but it cannot function on a steady diet of distrust for distrust's sake. There's a difference between asking hard questions in good faith and launching rhetorical grenades just to see what damage they might cause. She wasn't afraid to draw that line. She saw the danger in normalizing narratives that lack evidence and distort reality. This is about more than political theater. It's about civic responsibility. Crockett highlighted how such behavior erodes public confidence in institutions, distracts from governance, and divides communities. It becomes easy for elected officials to scapegoat, misdirect, or deflect when the public is confused or suspicious. And it becomes that much harder for genuine public servants to do their jobs when they're constantly forced to counter baseless claims instead of debating policy. What Crockett brought into sharp focus is the way conspiracy-driven politics can metastasize. It doesn't just stay on fringe internet forums, it makes its way into official hearings, press briefings, and even into legislation. The constant repetition of these narratives lends them a false legitimacy. It creates a feedback loop where every outrageous claim, no matter how absurd, becomes part of the political conversation. That's not just irresponsible, it's dangerous. And Crockett wasn't merely pointing fingers, she was issuing a challenge. A challenge to her colleagues to rise above the noise, to resist the temptation of easy outrage, and to reorient the political conversation toward facts, accountability, and the real concerns of the American people. She urged a return to a politics rooted in substance rather than spectacle, one where elected leaders are held to a standard of truthfulness and integrity, not rewarded for their ability to fan flames on social media. Her remarks resonated with many who are exhausted by the spectacle. People who want their representatives to focus on passing laws that improve their lives, not spend their days chasing shadows or crafting elaborate narratives that distract from legislative failure. For Crockett, the obsession with conspiracy theories isn't just a nuisance, it's an existential threat to effective governance. She also spoke to how this obsession creates an environment where bad faith actors thrive. When doubt is planted everywhere and truth is made subjective, it becomes easier for those with no solutions to rise to prominence simply by casting aspersions on others. Crockett didn't just reject that mindset, she dismantled it. Her argument was that facts matter, evidence matters, and leadership requires the discipline to resist conspiracy thinking even when it's politically convenient. She recognized that this is part of a larger strategy to paralyze the political system. If citizens are made to believe that nothing is real, no one is in control, and everything is being orchestrated from behind the scenes, then cynicism takes root. And once cynicism becomes widespread, collective action becomes impossible. That is a win for chaos, not for democracy. Crockett's message was ultimately a defense of the public's right to clarity, to reason, and to truth. She reminded everyone listening that while disagreement is healthy in a democracy, disinformation is not. And when disinformation is allowed to masquerade as oversight or inquiry, it creates a toxic environment that drives people away from the political process entirely. Her words stood as a clear signal. The business of governance must not be sidetracked by those more interested in suspicion than solutions. Jasmine Crockett has repeatedly emphasized the critical need for a strategic overhaul in how messages are delivered, particularly by those who claim to advocate for progress and equity. Her call for change isn't rooted in superficial rebranding or empty slogans. It's grounded in the urgent reality that the current political climate demands a smarter, sharper, and more coordinated communication effort. As disinformation spreads rapidly and public trust in institutions continues to erode, Crockett's argument is clear. Telling the truth is not enough. It has to be told better, louder, and in ways that resonate with people who are bombarded daily with conflicting narratives. Crockett has observed, like many others, that political messaging on her side of the aisle often fails not because it lacks substance, but because it lacks simplicity and emotional clarity. While policy experts may be capable of crafting thoughtful legislation, translating that complexity into language that speaks directly to the concerns of everyday people is another challenge entirely. Too often, well-meaning leaders bury their most compelling points under layers of policy jargon, failing to connect with voters who are looking for someone to understand and reflect their lived experiences. For Crockett, this is not just a messaging issue. It's a moral and strategic failing. She believes that values need to be communicated in a way that cuts through the noise. That means investing in creative media, storytelling, and direct digital engagement. It means understanding how narratives travel in the social media era, where attention spans are short and emotional resonance often matters more than technical precision. Crockett has stressed the importance of meeting people where they are, on their phones in community spaces, through cultural references, not where policymakers wish they were. To her, real connection comes from authenticity, consistency, and clarity. What Crockett is advocating for is not just more communication, but more intentional communication. She wants to see a coordinated effort across all levels of leadership to deliver clear and powerful messages that reflect not only the accomplishments of their movement, but also the vision they have for the future. She has pointed out that outrage and disinformation often travel faster and more effectively than truth, especially when opponents use fear, resentment, and division as fuel. Without a counter strategy that is just as accessible and emotionally resonant, the truth risks becoming background noise. Part of her critique is also self-reflective. She's acknowledged that, at times, those fighting for justice and equity have assumed that the strength of their ideas would speak for itself. But in a world where perception shapes reality, good ideas can't afford to whisper while falsehoods scream. Crockett urges her peers to become just as savvy with messaging as they are with policymaking. That means training communicators, empowering grassroots messengers, and investing in tools that can translate complex legislation into something that can be understood on a billboard, a tweet, or a church bulletin. Crockett has also pointed out that there's a disconnect between how policies are felt and how they're explained. For instance, when a working family receives a benefit, a tax credit, or relief, they should know why it happened and who fought for it. Too often, she argues, those wins go unclaimed by the very people who made them possible. In contrast, opponents are quick to brand every move they make, regardless of merit. This imbalance leaves entire communities unaware of who is really advocating for them. Crockett believes that telling that story better can build the trust and momentum necessary for long-term political change. She's also challenged leaders to stop playing defense. In her view, waiting to respond to disinformation or letting others define the terms of debate is a losing strategy. Instead, she calls for a proactive approach, setting the narrative early and repeating it often across all platforms. The goal is not to mimic the tactics of those spreading falsehoods, but to borrow the discipline and urgency with which they operate. Crockett believes that principled leadership and effective communication are not mutually exclusive. They must go hand in hand. In every public appearance where she touches on this issue, her message is consistent. Clarity is power. And those who truly care about justice, equality, and progress must learn how to speak not just to policy wonks and newsrooms, but to everyday people who are looking for someone to tell them the truth in a way that matters. Jasmine Crockett has made it increasingly clear that the future of political leadership depends on embracing a new generation that brings fresh energy, bold ideas, and an unflinching willingness to confront the toughest issues. For her, this isn't about age, it's about mindset. It's about cultivating leaders who are unapologetically authentic, grounded in their communities, and unafraid to disrupt outdated norms that no longer serve the people. She sees the path forward as one that requires more than simply holding office. It demands a transformation in how leaders think, speak, and lead. Crockett has spoken openly about the fatigue many Americans feel when it comes to politics. Voters are tired of rehearsed speeches, vague commitments, and empty gestures. They crave representation that reflects their daily realities, speaks their language, and genuinely fights for their interests. The new generation of leadership she envisions is one that doesn't tiptoe around controversy or wait for permission to do what's right. These are leaders who walk into a room with the courage to challenge broken systems and the confidence to build something better. Her vision includes those who are tech-savvy, community-rooted, and fluent in the language of social and cultural change. She sees leaders who can bridge divides, not by watering down their values, but by communicating them in ways that resonate across generations and experiences. These individuals are less interested in preserving political hierarchies and more interested in flipping power structures to work for ordinary people. They are grounded in activism, advocacy, and an understanding that politics doesn't start in a boardroom. It starts on the ground, where real people live. Crockett recognizes that these emerging leaders won't come from the traditional pipeline. Many of them are educators, organizers, small business owners, nurses, or public defenders. They come from environments where solutions aren't theoretical. They're a matter of survival. That kind of lived experience, she argues, brings an unmatched urgency and clarity to decision-making. It's this perspective that brings about more compassionate policies, more inclusive dialogue, and more honest governance. One of the key distinctions Crockett draws is between those who seek power to maintain control and those who seek it to serve. The new generation she champions is driven by service, not status. They're not playing politics to climb a ladder. They're stepping into leadership because they can't afford not to. Whether it's racial justice, climate change, housing, healthcare, or education, the stakes are too high for performative politics. These leaders aren't afraid to name the problem, even when it makes people uncomfortable. And they're not afraid to put their reputations on the line to do what's right. She also understands that new leadership must reflect the diversity of America, not just in demographics, but in thought, experience, and approach. That means centering voices that have long been marginalized or silenced. It means breaking the unspoken rules about who gets to lead, what leadership should look like, and how power is distributed. Crockett doesn't just talk about inclusion as a checkbox. She sees it as the foundation for durable, responsive, and just governance. There's also a level of emotional intelligence Crockett believes is essential. New leaders must be able to listen, to engage with people who disagree, and to navigate complexity without compromising their principles. It's not about being palatable to everyone. It's about being anchored in truth and being willing to evolve. Flexibility without losing focus. Strength without arrogance. She believes this generation is uniquely positioned to lead because they've grown up navigating crises, misinformation, economic hardship, and social upheaval, and they're still standing. Crockett often challenges the idea that one has to wait their turn to lead. She rejects the notion that only those who've climbed every rung of the political ladder deserve a seat at the table. In her view, real leaders don't need to be anointed. They rise because their communities lift them, because their ideas demand attention, and because they're too committed to wait. She's calling for a break from the passive go along to get along, politics that has too often failed to deliver. In its place, she champions urgency, clarity, and a willingness to take risks. The kind of leadership she calls for is not afraid of being loud when the moment requires it. It doesn't apologize for being passionate or persistent. It welcomes discomfort, knowing that true change never happens without it. And above all, it prioritizes people over politics, truth over spin, and action over optics. For Crockett, the next generation isn't just ready to lead, they're already doing it. What they need is space, support, and a system willing to let go of the past to make room for what's next. Jasmine Crockett's stance throughout this ongoing political dialogue reflects more than just momentary passion. It represents a growing wave of leadership grounded in principle, urgency, and truth. Her words cut through the noise not because they are loud, but because they are deliberate. In every instance, whether she's calling out conspiracy-driven politics, demanding smarter messaging, or elevating the next generation of leaders, she is pushing for a political environment that values honesty, justice, and accountability over performative outrage or manufactured drama. In today's fragmented landscape, where misinformation and apathy often seem to dominate, voices like Crockett's are not just refreshing, they're necessary. She represents a kind of political clarity that is increasingly rare. the ability to speak with both passion and purpose, to challenge power without compromising values, and to defend democratic principles while still pushing the system to be better. She refuses to be distracted by theatrics, nor does she allow those theatrics to go unchecked. Instead, she meets them head-on, not out of ego, but out of obligation, to the truth, to her constituents, and to the country. Crockett's arguments about messaging and leadership are especially vital in this moment. It's not enough to have the right policies or moral high ground. If those values aren't communicated effectively, if they don't resonate emotionally with the public, they risk getting buried under a tidal wave of misinformation. She's not just calling for louder voices, she's calling for smarter, sharper, and more emotionally connected ones. She understands that people don't just vote based on facts. They vote based on stories, values, and who they believe sees and hears them. In this, Crockett is urging those in power to stop assuming the public understands and to start making sure they do. Moreover, her emphasis on new leadership speaks directly to the heart of where this country must go. She knows that the same ideas, delivered by the same people, using the same tired tactics, will never spark the kind of bold change the moment demands. She's not asking permission to shake things up. She's already doing it. And in doing, so she's clearing a path for others to follow. Her vision isn't rooted in nostalgia or tradition. It's rooted in the present, messy, urgent, and complicated as it is. And yet, there's a deep undercurrent of hope in everything she says. A belief that even now, with all the dysfunction and division, progress is still possible. But only if people are brave enough to fight for it, not just with speeches, but with strategy, not just with outrage, but with action. In a political moment too often dominated by noise, Jasmine Crockett's voice rings with clarity. She isn't just participating in the conversation, she's redefining its terms. And if her vision takes hold, it won't just be politics that changes, it will be the country,